M8 tracker spawned from the Game Boy game LSDJ there on the left. And you can see the DNA. It still has the A and B buttons, the select and start buttons at the bottom, and the D controls. But it's turned into a professional music studio that fits in your pocket. Honestly guys, I didn't intend on making a Boards of Canada Skyliner sounding track, but I was messing with the FM synth in the M8 and the ability to make a chord using the carriers as independent oscillators. And so I used 3 oscillators to make an orange Ramada chord, and then I noticed that I had an extra oscillator there, so I turned it up and it was a low sine wave and it started to sound like Skyliner. So I added Skyliner style drums to it and used the randomized function to make 11 different bongo sounds at random and with random panning. And I used chants on the main drums. There's a lot of fun to be had with the M8, and it might just be the best small device for making music ever. This thing is genius. Let's take a look at how it works. I should mention here that you don't need the M8 device to run this software and make music with it. You can get one of these teensies, and Dirtywave has made available the ability to run this on your computer. The M8 has multiple screens that you can navigate by using this little navigation menu in the lower right. And currently S is highlighted because we're on the song screen. And to move around this menu, you hold down Shift and you use these directional keys. So I want to go up here to P, the project menu. Let's do a quick Kaini Industries using the internal synth inside the M8. So we're going to change the tempo to 97. The way you change values is by holding down Edit. And you can see we could adjust the output volume, speaker volume. You can have MIDI settings and change the input of your MIDI keyboard. You can start this thing playing and play in MIDI notes live. And then down here at the bottom you see Edit Theme. And you can change the colors and the way everything appears on the screen. But I'm going to go up here to New and hit Edit. And what you do here is you create and number chains of phrases. And a phrase is like a pattern. You can have 8 tracks of these chains of phrases or patterns playing from the top of the screen downward. So I'm going to hit Edit, and I'm going to hold down Edit to change this value to 1. So I've created and numbered chain 1. I'll hold down Shift and use the right arrow. And now I'm going to create and number phrases, and a phrase is like a pattern. So typically the way people do this is to put 4 16-step phrases in a chain. So I'm going to hold down Edit and make that 1, 2, 3, 4. So now I have 4 16-step phrases. Hold down Shift and go right. And now we are in phrase 1. If you're new to this diagram might be helpful. We created a chain number 1, out at the main song page. And when the top-down cursor plays that chain, it will be playing the chain of 16-step phrases that we made, 1 through 4. And it will play 4 16-step patterns. Now I can quickly look at the other phrases by holding down Option and using the down arrow. Now we're looking at phrase 2, phrase 3, phrase 4. You can also do it just by scrolling the cursor and get around to the different phrases. You can also look at phrases on other tracks quickly by holding down Option and using left or right to go to the respective track. But I'm going to drop a note right here because that lets us go over to Instruments and hit Shift and use the right arrow. And we're changing a value here, so I'll hold down Edit and use the right arrow. And you could choose Wave Synth, which is like a typical 8-bit sound. You can do Macro Synth, which is Mutable Instruments Braids. You can do a sample, FM Synth, or MIDI out. You can play an external MIDI instrument using this. But for Kaini, I'm going to choose Macro Synth. And if you look at my patch for Kaini, you can see that it uses both the saw and square. And it happens that in Macro Synth there is a saw square oscillator, so I'll go over to that. That'll be my oscillator. Gonna leave the timbre and color where they are, but look, you can degrade and do redux on it. It's like kind of a bit reduction if you want it to sound grainy sounding. I'm going to put a low pass filter on there and choose the low pass filter, but I'm going to turn the low pass filter all the way down. I'm going to use the envelope to control that. And I'm going to turn the resonance to about 80. And then over here, there's an amp section. You can choose various types of amplifier clipping. If I hold down Edit, and let's take a look. Sine, fold, wrap, post. It's really good, the post AD. And then you can choose the different effects, chorus, delay, reverb. I'm going to choose some reverb for this, but these are just sends to the effects. We can look at the actual effects page, hold down Shift and go left here all the way, and then go down. We get to the mixer page where we can mix the 8 tracks. We can have a DJ filter, a limiter, and overall effects volumes. But if we go down another step, we can look at the actual effect parameters. So that's where those sends from that instrument are going to. And now let's take a look at the LFOs and envelope. So like a typical synth, you know, I'm going to have an envelope to volume, and I'm going to have an envelope to the filter, the cutoff. And I'm going to have an LFO to pitch to give it that analog, wobbling analog sound. Although I'm going to turn this way down to just 1. The amount, I wish the amount actually went even less than that because this is still a little too much pitch wobble. I'm going to put this on a sine wave LFO. Free running. Entry data is not going to re-trigger that. Leave the frequency at 10. That's pretty slow. And I want an LFO to the filter. I want it to cut off. Fast forward here. I messed around with it for a bit. And these are the settings I got for the envelopes and LFOs. And these are the settings that I ended up with. And now it's time to enter all the notes. So I'm going to navigate here again over to the phrase page. So I'll hold down Shift. And now we're going to do some note entry. Well, we have quite a bit of information on our screen now. It's a good time to talk about copy, paste, nudge, and delete. So in order to copy something, you have to select it. And you do that by Shift Option, and it highlights it. At this point, you can use the directional keys to select more information that you want to copy. Now, when you hit Option again, it is copied. To paste it, you hold Shift and hit edit, and it will paste it in there. To delete it, you hit the Option and Edit keys at the same time. To nudge something, you have to have selected more than one thing in every direction. So if I hit Shift, Option, and I'll select some stuff over there and something down. Now I've got more than one thing in every direction. And so now I can hold Edit and use the directional keys to nudge that information down. And I sped up here a little bit in time, and I went ahead and entered the notes. So these are the notes. That's phrase 1. And I'm going to hold down Option here, and I'll be able to flip through the pages. And there's phrase 2. Phrase 3, the third 16 steps. Phrase 4. And now let's listen to it. There is a kind of portamento on here using pitch slide, and I'm going to show you a couple of things here at one time. I'm going to show you that you can change a bunch of values at once and they'll stay relative, but here they're all set to the same thing, so I can show you different degrees of portamento. So the way you highlight them is just by Shift Option, as I showed earlier, and then you can hold down Edit and use the up and down arrows to change the values. So starting out with extreme portamento, and holding down Edit, I can turn on these values at one time to a more reasonable 1. Well, I showed you how to make a track, and we made track 1. And I'm going to talk a little bit about the total structure. So eventually you'll make probably a kick track like I have here on 4, and maybe some other drums and other instruments. And you'll want to play all those tracks at one time. Well, these 8 cursors that come down from the top, 8 green cursors, are independent. And so if one of these chains is of a different length, then the cursor will not come down at the same rate. And so I purposely did that with this one. So watch the green cursors come down. See, the one on track 4 there is moving faster. And then there's also these FEs in the spaces in between. And what those do is those are blank patterns or blank chains that are the same length as the other chains, 4 phrases long. So the cursors will all move at the same rate. So let's take a look inside the FE filler pattern is what it is. It's just 4 FEs. And if I go into one of those phrases, they're blank. And so it's just a filler that's 4 long that makes all the cursors descend at the same rate. So that's why you want to have each one of these chains have 4 phrases. And so that's the song structure. When you do your percussion, you're probably going to be using drum samples. And there's several ways to chop those up and use those with the sampler instrument. And you do that by going over here to load, and you load in your sample. And then you can edit your sample. So you can do an AFX Bucephalus bouncing ball type of thing using the sampler. All you have to do is set it to forward loop and adjust start the loop length out at 50 hex. and set the envelope to length, the loop length, with these settings, and you'll get a Bucephalus bouncing ball. So I've put a loop into the sampler and it doesn't fit. At this tempo, it's cutting off the end of the sample. But the M8 has a type of time stretch that it can do. So I'm going to use the LFO to sort of ramp the playhead through the sample, start to finish. And that way, when I change the tempo and change the position in time that the start and finish are, the LFO will still ramp it from the start of the sample to the end of the sample. So I'm going to hold down Shift and go to the LFO, and I'm going to change it to loop start full amount and change the oscillator to ramp up, so it will ramp the playhead through the sample start to finish. Change it to retrig, and I have a setting of 10 hex in the frequency, and 10 hex is the equivalent of 16 in decimal, and so it will ramp up from 1 to 16 steps, which will be perfect for the size of these phrases in here. And you have to change play mode to forward loop and change the length to 0. And now over here in the phrase, when I play it, fits perfectly. But what if I change the tempo? So now if we change the settings to pitch, we can use ramp up and ramp down to get a tape start and stop effect. So here's with ramp up. And ramp down. So you probably liked my crazy slicing of the Amen break. So let's take a look at it. I just put this slice on 16 slices. And I put the Amen break in there. And I sliced it using the 16. And so it just sliced it evenly into 16. And that's what's in there. After you cut this into 16, come down here and save it, because it will create the slice markers within the wave file, I believe. And so when you use slice here and use these random effects, it needs to read that, I think. So I just put all C1 in there, and I use slice up here at the top. You see that slice effect I set to 0. And then I used random, which I set to F. The reason I set it to F because it is equivalent to 16 in decimal, and so that will randomize 16. And then I put pitch in here, and I just kind of adjusted it. That's why it's 3, and random is 3 as well. And then I wanted some more lanes to do some stuff with, some chance stuff and all that. So I wanted to move to the table, and the table can run parallel to this and add more effects to it. And so I put table hops 0 through F. So if we go over to the table, you can see that the table moves with my break. And so you could add even more effects. And so I just added some reverses. So when it says PLY01, that's in reverse, but I didn't want it to happen all the time, so I put a chance. Then I put a re-trigger down there, and that's gonna happen. I put a 6 for that re-trigger. Then I had some other effects in there too that weren't really working out. You get too many things going on, but so it does re-triggers occasionally. So that's how I did the crazy Amen slicing. So here's my sample of the bongos. Just 11 different sounding bongos. And so I loaded it in there and I went down here to, I think it slices really well by slicing the silent spaces. If you hold down edit, you can see the different types of chopping. And it also has other features like normalize and downsample, which works really great on like break beats. But I think the slice silent algorithm worked really well for this one. And then if you go up here to right by slice marker there, you can hold down edit and you can go through your different slices and play them. Now, if you wanted to adjust them, of course you can do that too. So it's telling me the start and end point of that sample there. And so if I want to change the start and end point of it, well, that's the start point there. So I can edit the start point. If I hold down edit and use these right and left arrows, I get a fine adjustment like that, where I can make fine adjustments to the start point. And with the up and down, I can make coarse adjustments to the start point. And then I can just move that over and make adjustments to the end point. So it's really easy to edit your samples. And then there's several different ways to play it so that you get the result you want. But I'm going to play it using the file. And so I'm going to be telling it which slice to play. So I've just got all my slices set on the same note. They're all on C1. And then I'm telling it to play slice 0. And I'm also using the pan effect. Pan, I've got a 1 in there, but it could be pan 0. But then it's, the key is this effect I have below slice 0. And if I hold down edit and hit the up arrow, it gives me a description of this one. And it says it's randomized. Randomize the value of the last effect. So by putting random all the way down, it's randomizing the slice. And because I have randomize 0A, that's 0 through 10. That's 11 total slices. Then on the pan, I want it to pan to the maximum. So I have FF in there. Randomize to FF. And then you get this. I could listen to that for hours. Now these are the drums. For the main drums, I just had the kick, snare, closed hat, and open hat. I've added an extra kick here at the bottom of this. And I'm going to use the chance effect to make it play 50% of the time. The chance effect has 2 digits, and the left digit determines the chance of that note playing. The right digit determines whether some other effect will take effect and how often that will happen. So I'll put a retrig of twice on there, and I'll put in 80 hexadecimal in there. Should be close to a 50% chance. And there's a 0, which says should never retrigger. All right, now let me start turning up the possibility it'll retrigger. I did this one copying Venetian snares. He uses some unusual timing. I made every phrase in this hop at E so that it would have 7/8 timing. It also uses the nth effect in the retrigger command. It's nth 3 retriggers 6, meaning that every third time it's going to retrigger 6 times. In this little peep style emo trap, you hear a guitar-like sound I made with the macro synth. And you hear some interesting triplet hi-hats, so let's take a look at how that's done. Alright, so the groove function is, you can see it here, a G above the P for phrase. So I'm going to hold down Shift and go up. And now we are in the groove page. And it says 6 and 6. And if I hit play, those just alternate back and forth. Each of the 16 lines has 6 ticks on it. And it's telling me it's going to go 6 ticks and 6 ticks and then just alternate those. So if I want swing, I'm going to have to increase that top number. And I can, to be dramatic, I can increase it to 8. Then I've got to decrease the bottom number to 4. And it will still come out to be 96 ticks at the end. Play that with the metronome. Classical swing there. But then if I want triplets, then we have to figure out the math for that. So if we divided this 96 into 4, and then we'd have 4 sections of 24. And if we're going to skip every 4th beat, which is what the triplet grid would call for, then we need 8, 8, 8, and 0. And then each of the 4 sections would still be 24. So now we got 8, 8, 8, and 0. Let's see what happens with the metronome. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Now, as far as making different grooves, you hold down on the Option key, and now you can scroll through all the different grooves that you've created. And I can use an effect to recall any groove I want to recall at any time. So I had put that triplet grid as number 2. So if I select groove 2 there as my effect, then I'm getting the triplet grid, and it's skipping every 4th one. And then I could put some MPC style ratchets in there. If I hold down edit and hit up, I get this list of the possible effects. And I could do retrig last note to get a little ratchet in there. And I could even put that with the triplet. Let's talk about tables for a second. Well, I used a table before to add effects to my drums, so I would have extra effects lanes, and I made it run the same speed as my drums by using the table hop command, but it also can be used to transpose using that first column there. And so it can be used as an arpeggiator, and an extremely fast sounding one if you listen to some of the 8-bit music. But here I'm using it to arpeggiate a little line to go along with my house chord. Like that. And with the house chord. And I can change the table tick and get various arpeggiation results with it. Now this thing has scales in it. You can use this scale effect to set your key and your scale. So I'll change to some of the different scales and see if it makes any difference. Let's take a look at the scale. I think it was above one of these. Let's see. Above groove, and I showed groove before. There's scale. You can get like an AFX microtonal sound here by detuning these after the decimal point a little bit. So if I go maybe down 30 on that one. That actually sounds fantastic. You can get a sidechain type of effect going on here, and so every time you have a kick, what you can do is turn down the volume on another track. So on the other track I have kind of a pad sound, and so I can put the effect here for the volume of track 1. I'm going to start with, let's start with about 80. And I'm going to copy those down with zeros. And I'm going to make the last one F0. Then I'm going to iterate the values in between. I'm going to hit Shift Option and then go up and get those all selected. And now if I hit Shift Edit, it sort of filled in all those missing values that were zeros. And I know Red Means Recording did kind of a systematic way of making a pop song on this. It's a really good video, and all users of the M8 should probably watch that. And I just kind of covered the things that I have been working on with it and how I use it. And then so I hope you enjoyed that. I want to thank all my patrons for their support. And if you want me to post any of these files on there, just ask me on Patreon and I'll give you the files. Anything that's on here, it's yours. Hope you found this interesting. I'll see you in the next one.